We have an incredibly talented group of people. But yeah, we'll be doing two things and three things at one time. Well, at the same time, though, we're going to be watching very closely the hotspots. We're going to be taking care and watching very closely our senior citizens, especially those with a problem or an illness. We're going to be watching them very, very closely. And we can do that and have an open economy, have an open country. And we have to do that because that causes other problems. And maybe it causes much bigger problems than the problem we're talking about now. You understand? Jeff, please.
Mr. President, following up on that same topic and on your tweet, do you think that the cure so far has been worse than the problem?
I think the cure has been very tough. This has been this was an operation. This was somebody going to a doctor and saying, you need an operation. And we've had an operation. We've learned a lot. And we fixed a lot of problems. One of the things we fixed is, if you look at the obsolete system that this administration inherited, it wasn't meant for this. It was meant for a small group of people, and even for that, it was not very good and very obsolete. We now have a testing program now that will hopefully be able to be used for many years into the future should we have another event like this. I don't think you'll have another event like this. This is very unique. You look back into time, you look back decades and decades. We can name them all, even if you go back 10 years. You know, you go back to '09, but that wasn't like this, as it turned out. But they lost a lot of people. We were early, Jeff, because of the fact that we closed early. That was a big move. Please, Kristen. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
You had said previously, I think from this podium, that the virus could still be with us through July or August. By suggesting now that the government might change these standards or these recommendations.
Well, it's not change. We're doing things. Yeah, this was a learning experience for the people of the country.
I'm just wondering if the time frame has changed for you. The
Changed?
The July-August time frame of when you think the virus will be under control.
Well, I think we've learned a lot. I think that there's so much discipline now that we never had. Nobody ever said, don't shake hands. I did actually before I became a politician. Once I became a politician, then it's hard getting used to not doing it because, you do it with everybody, with literally thousands of people a week. You're shaking hands with big groups of people. We've learned a lot. There's a great discipline that this whole country has learned, having to do with distancing, having to do with shaking hands. I think a lot of it's going to stay long after the virus is gone. I really think it's probably good practice anyway, but I think it's going to stay long after the virus is gone. But we have to open our country because that causes problems that, in my opinion, could be far bigger problems. Far bigger. This is a severe medical situation that could cause problems far beyond the medical and then increase the medical problems to things that had nothing to do with this original medical problem. We can't let that happen to our country. We have the greatest country in the world. I'm not going to let that happen. But this 2 weeks that we have spent has been an incredible learning period and process. Please, Kristen.
One, you said it's likely going to be weeks, not months, before you suggest easing these guidelines that you put out. Have any of the doctors on your team told you that's the right path to pursue?
We spoke to them today, and I was telling them that we have two things to look for. Don't forget the doctors. If it were up to the doctors, they may say, let's keep it shut down. Let's shut down the entire world, because, again, you're up to almost 150 countries. So let's shut down the entire world. And when we shut it down, that would be wonderful. And let's keep it shut for a couple of years. You can't do that. And you can't do that with a country, especially the number one economy anywhere in the world, by far. Number one economy in the world. You can't do that. Because, well, it causes bigger problems than the original. That's why I talk about the cure being worse than the problem. We can't have the cure be worse than the problem. But what we have done, so this is not retracing, this isn't anything. We've done it really well, because this 2-week period has been good. And I'm not saying it ends at that time. We have another 7 days or so. I'm not saying it ends at that time. But I am saying, it's been like this incredible learning process. That's going to go into the future. That's going to go even as we open up our country. And we're going to be watching New York, and we're going to be watching California. We're going to be watching the state of Washington and other places. Illinois is becoming a hotspot. And we can do both. Now, we may quarantine. I mean, we will be quarantining many people in these areas. There are other areas that just aren't affected, or they're affected very little. And why would we close down 100% of the country? There are areas within New York where New York will be open, but there are areas within New York. Remember this, New York has the New York Stock Exchange. It has NASDAQ. It has the exchanges. To close the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ and with all of the great work they're doing, I mean, they've gone largely to computer. You look at the floor, it's incredible what they can do, but it's fully open. But we don't want to be doing that. But we can do, what I'm saying basically is that we can do two things simultaneously. And we've had this incredible learning period. Plus, people have been in a period and they won't be calling, oh, gee, because I've got many, many people that now come to me and say, we get it. We think we can really do it now and do it while we're open. So at some point, we'll be setting some guidelines. We'll be setting some date lines. And we'll be announcing them in the not-too-distant future.
Any of the doctors on your team endorsed easing the federal guidelines?
Not endorsed. We talked together, and I think they're okay with it, and I'm okay with it. But this could be a much bigger problem. This could create a much bigger problem than the problem that you start off with. Now, other nations are going to have to do what they're going to do, but they'll probably do something very similar. But in our case, much more so than anyone else, because of the magnitude of our economy, the tremendous size of what we've built and what we have, and the jobs involved. You know, you have almost 160 million jobs in this country now, the most ever, by far the most ever. The number of jobs, almost 160 million. So we can't turn that off and think it's going to be wonderful. There'll be tremendous repercussions. There will be a tremendous death from that. Death. You know, you're talking about death. Probably more death from that than anything that we're talking about with respect to the virus.
If we continue with these strict guidelines than if we ease them?
No, I think we're going to do them both. I think that's what I'm saying. I think we can do them both. Now, we haven't announced a date, but we're getting fairly close to coming up with a date, and it's a much shorter period of time than I've been hearing the news report. And I think everybody should be happy with that. But great knowledge was gained. Please.